Thank you for coming this evening. We continue our studies in the book of 1 Corinthians, and we are reaching the conclusion of the section that deals with meat offered to idols as an example of matters of liberty. It's on, Bill. I'm doing the best I can.
I see the lights are not on the box back there.
I don't know. Is Dick here? Can you check the volume, please, Dick? So we're continuing the study of chapters 8 through 10 of the discussing matters of liberty. And in particular, we have discussed that eating meats offered to an idol is an example of a matter of liberty in different circumstances where it may reach different conclusions. When it was in an idol's temple, it was something that should not be done. We talked about the reasons for that, but you bought meat in the market, it may be bought something that came from an idol's temple, but it doesn't matter, you can eat it. But if you're invited to a private dinner, what you're offered may have been offered to an idol, but again, just eat it unless someone expresses concern. So this evening, we're beginning to make some applications. Last time we talked about some principles, basic foundational principles that relate to the subject: knowledge, influence, love for others, edification, glory for God, and salvation of souls. And the thing we tried to emphasize was the fact that it's not simply a matter of is this technically right or wrong. It's also a matter of how are we affecting other people, and are we helping people to be saved, or are we causing them to be stumble and perhaps be lost? So then we looked at a number of specific areas, more specific principles, as we applied those basic ones, and that is the fact that we're talking about matters of liberty. We're not talking about things that are required or forbidden. That sometimes the fact that an act has some ties to past religious activities does not necessarily make them sinful. Circumstances alter the conclusions. We're considering cases where our contact tempts somebody to sin, not just that they don't like it or they're even upset about it, but is it causing them to sin and maybe be lost? And we should not cause anyone to, or tempt anyone to sin, not just the weak brethren, who he talks about a good bit, but other people as well. Then there are people who are contentious and divisive, and that's a different situation than just someone who has a weak conscience. And sometimes, either way we go, there'll be people who'll be conscious, will be upset, either we do this or we do the opposite, either way. So we have to consider with situations like that, and that the principles we're talking about, we need to consider the principles, whether it's a local church, but it applies differently because we've got so many people to be considered. And then sometimes we're talking about an authorized practice. It may not be required, but it's authorized and there's serious spiritual benefits. Now, those are the things that we talked about last week. Now, tonight, we're going to get into some specific examples. Now, what I want us to do as we look at the examples, and you have the list, should have, of the examples we're going to be studying about tonight. We're going to look at, is it like the idol's temple, where you shouldn't do it? Or is it like meat bought in a marketplace, which is okay? Or maybe in the private dinner, where it depends on the situation. Now, you may have noticed this up here. Some of you may have seen that. I gave you an opportunity to suggest what you wanted to talk about, and I gave you a list so that we can come prepared. So I appreciate if you would stay with the things that we have assigned, because those are the things that people have come prepared to discuss. So we're not just thinking from the top of our heads and things that we may not have studied through, but we'll continue to consider things that we have studied and prepared for. Okay? Everybody ready? Okay. All right, first one, how about using names that originated in idolatry? Now, you may think that, why are we talking about that? Well, what we're talking about are things like the names of the days of the week. Most of the names of the days of the week come from heathen idols. Sunday is from the sun god, Monday from the moon god, Saturn, and so forth, or Saturday. And the same thing for the names of the planets. Mars and Venus and Saturn and Jupiter, those are all names of Roman gods. So, what does this classify? Should we use those names or not, and why or why not? What's your response? Karen?
I think it's like eating what was bought in the market, that it's acceptable because it no longer holds any relevance to how it started out, just like meat might have been offered to the idol, but now you're just buying it in the market to eat.
Okay? Other comments? Okay, so the idea was that it's lost, may have had an original, some connection to various heathen gods, but the way people use it today, it's lost its connection. Okay, so that's a basic comment. Other discussion on that? Do we have a problem with that conclusion? Sharon has a problem with the conclusion.
Just an additional thought that nobody, it doesn't affect your influence. Nobody thinks because I talk about Monday or the planet Mars that I'm worshiping an idol. So there's no connection to that anymore. There's no fellowship with those original names. Nobody is going to be caused to sin because I use those terms.
Okay, so we're using some of the principles, you see. Now, I brought that one up first because I figured that was an easy one, but the thing is I wanted to illustrate the application of the principles we talked about. First of all, the principle that something that may have had an origin in something that wasn't right may have lost that over time, or may not have that significance in the way it's being used. That's one thing. And then the other thing is the influence of it. Nobody thinks because you talk about Monday or because you talk about Mars or whatever that you're worshiping an idol. It's lost that harmful influence. So those are some things that illustrate what we're talking about and hopefully help us to see making applications. That was an easy one. Other comments on that first one about names that may have originated in idolatry. Okay, and they get tougher as we go. All right, how about eating at a tavern? Friends invite you to eat with them in a tavern. You don't drink, you don't want to drink, you don't think it's right, but should you go just to be with your friends? Which category would that fit, and what would the conclusion be? Steve.
It could possibly lead others to stumble.
Okay, so you have a problem of influence, like we've been talking about. I see some other hands. Susie.
Well, I agree. I put it in the column or the category of it's the same as eating in an idol's temple, and because of that, it would be forbidden. Because why do people go to taverns? They go there to drink, and so the influence would be that you're there to drink also.
Okay. Other comments? Sharon.
It has pretty much all of the problems with eating in an idol's temple. It's a potential temptation to me. It's I'm having a bad influence on other people and might cause them to sin. And I'm sorry, losing my train of thought. And I'm having, it's not worship, but I'm having a fellowship with people who are doing things that are wrong.
Okay. So, again, if we apply the principles, the reasons why you should not eat meat in an idol's temple, for the very same reason you should not eat with people in a tavern, knowing that that's what people do there, is that they drink alcoholic beverages, and it's going to look like you think that's okay. First of all, people probably won't know whether you're drinking alcohol or not, but even if they did, they wouldn't think you'd be there unless you thought it was okay. So you're going to have an influence that leads people to think that you think that's okay. So you've got an influence question and a temptation to you. You may go in saying, well, I won't drink the alcohol, but as time goes by, you may change. Again, the problem that we talked about with regard to the eating in the meats in the idol's temple, and the problem of participation along with other people, and at least appearing to participate in what should not be. Okay? Other comments on eating at a tavern with friends? Other applications of it? Okay? Hopefully that one will be relatively easy, but it gets some tougher as we go along. How about though, you go to a family type restaurant, not a tavern, but it does serve alcohol, and you don't order alcohol, you don't sit where it looks like you're drinking alcohol, but what about that? Eating with in a family restaurant that does serve alcohol. What was your application there? Rick.
I look at that as eating at what was bought in the market. There's nothing wrong with eating in an atmosphere of a dining area, being served by waitresses, waiters, whatever, and ordering off of a menu with nothing to do with alcohol whatsoever. Now, if you're going up and sitting at the bar, or you're sitting there ordering drinks, then that's on you. That's your own. You brought that on yourself.
Okay. Other comments? Right.
Years ago, I would have had a problem with that, but now it's almost every restaurant serves alcohol. Be very difficult to find a place that did not serve alcohol. And I suppose throughout history that's the case, that travelers would stop somewhere, even 2,000 years ago, to get something to eat, and I imagine they probably also sold alcohol.
Okay. Now, part of the question, though, I didn't read it yet, but what about you know somebody who thinks it's wrong to do that? How would that affect it? Would that affect the conclusion? That's part of the question. What if someone objects to it, Frank?
If I knew this friend objected or had a conscience against that, then I would look for somewhere else, even if it was just a fast food place, to eat with them.
Okay. Other comments? Susie?
Are you asking whether we should change our conduct for a friend that thinks it's wrong, even in their absence?
I'm asking for comments on the question. You're trying to get me to answer the question. I know you. You're trying to get me to answer the question. Okay, other comments? Okay, I would say one thing obvious is you don't take them, if you're going out with them, you don't take them to a restaurant that serves alcohol, knowing that they have a problem of conscience with it. Okay? And you certainly wouldn't flaunt in their presence the fact that you don't think it's wrong. Other comments? Susie?
I think personally, I have to use discretion about the establishment itself and how it's arranged. Earlier this year, we went to a restaurant that we could, not that particular restaurant, but that brand of restaurant, and hadn't had any issues with it. But it made us feel very uncomfortable after we were there. For us, it was too close, and we thought, okay, lesson learned. We won't do that again for our conscience. But that's how we decided to handle it.
Okay, so I would say, at least in the general sense, that this is more in the category of the private dinner thing, in which circumstances may affect your conclusion. In general, it may not be wrong, especially since you're not going to drink. But circumstances, especially if someone who is with you or whatever, it may affect your decision. But always remember, the point is, we're helping people be saved. We don't want to lead anybody to sin. Okay, other comments? Okay, next one. Okay, well, what about you buying groceries at a store that sells alcohol? or at a gas station that sells alcohol or lottery tickets or whatever. Now you're not eating or drinking there, but you're buying your groceries or whatever. Karen?
Well, I would say it's acceptable because the purpose of the grocery store or the gas station is to sell groceries, food, or gas. And the fact that they happen to also sell alcohol is an aside of their purpose and why you're there.
Okay, other comments? Steve?
Pretty much what Karen said. You're not engaging with the alcohol or lottery, you're just getting essentials.
Okay, other comments? Okay, and Sharon?
And specifically, that means that when we're at a grocery store, people aren't going to assume that we're buying alcohol just because we're in the grocery store, or they're not going to assume that we're buying cigarettes or lottery tickets just because we're at a gas station. So
Hey.
influence is not harmed by that.
Okay, so we're back to the subject of influence. Is it leading somebody to sin? And people know that when you buy groceries, most of the time the store is going to sell some other things that you may not buy, but they're not going to assume that you buy alcohol just because you're in a grocery store or what have you. Again, it's a question of influence, and because of the circumstances that you have to make that decision. Okay, so I would put that one in the category of the meat market. People are just not going to be influenced harmfully because you buy your groceries at a store that also happens to sell things that it shouldn't sell. Other comments on the eating at the, or rather buying your groceries at a store? Anybody else? All right, how about going to a casino? Similar to the tavern thing, you have friends who invite you to a casino. You're not going to gamble because you don't think that's right, but you think, well, I'll go and I'll be with my friends and visit with them, but I'm not going to gamble. What about that one? Rick?
I'd put that right there with eating in an idol's temple. Just people seeing you go in and out, or knowing that you've been there, you're a bad influence with that.
Okay, so like the idol's temple. Other comments? Karen?
Well, I agree with what Rick said. I would say it's forbidden because the purpose of a casino is to gamble.
Yeah.
That's their business. They happen to serve food as an aside, but gambling is their business.
So the purpose of a casino exists to gamble, for people to gamble. That's what it's for. So if you're there, people are naturally going to assume either that you're doing that, or at least you don't think there's anything wrong with it, because if there was something you thought was wrong, you wouldn't be there. Okay? So again, you have the problem of influence because of what the place is for, what the activity is about. Okay? So it's like the idol's temple, it's like the tavern and so on. Okay? Terry?
When we were in Prescott one year, there's a big casino that sets up on top of the hill, very close to the church building. And they had the signs up that they were doing the leather workers convention there that week. And so a lot of people knew, about our leather company. And it was the convention that we had been to at other times when it was not held in Prescott. It was in the other cities and it was not at a casino. But people asked, are you going up there to the leather convention? Do you know that's going on this week? And we would say, yes, we know it's going on, but we're not going. No, we're not going up there for that. But there were some who did. They didn't see a problem with it. We didn't know how it was set up at all because we'd never been up the hill to where it was. Maybe the Christians that had talked to us and knew how it was set up, knew there was a separate building and area where the convention was going on, but we felt like it was just too much lending our approval of what was going on at that particular place, and we didn't go. And I personally, for us, it would have been wrong to go.
Okay. Anything else on the casino? Okay, and the next one is, what about a dance? And I'm talking about typical dance like high schools have and so on, prom and that kind of thing. What about letting your child go or attending it, even though you don't intend to dance, but the young person goes anyway? What about that? Where does that fall? And Frank?
Before I learned of the gospel, when I was in high school, I attended some dances at high school. And so I know what goes on there and what goes on from the dance leading to other things. Even in a high school chaperoned dance, there's too much, there's lewdness and other activities going on that I know that it would be wrong to allow a child to go and be tempted. So I would say that should be forbidden.
Okay. Other comments on attending a dance, even if you don't intend to dance? Other comments? Susie?
It's not only, back when I was a kid, this wasn't the issue. I mean, we didn't go to dances, that wasn't the point. But now the attire is so lewd and provocative. You can't get away from that, even if you're not dancing. You have to see that. So the environment is not good, period.
Okay, other comments? And I would probably add to Frank's comment, I think it's not gotten any better since we were the problem, and Susie's point about the way they dress, they've dressed immodestly when I was in high school, which was a few years ago. I didn't go, but I know but it's worse, if anything, much worse today. So what are the points? What are the reasons why not to go in the idol's temple? Because of the influence. You may lead somebody else to think that you think it's okay. Why are you at a dance for? If you're not going to dance, okay, people see you there, they think you think it's okay. Well, it's there to dance. If you're not going to do it, or if you don't at least think it's okay, why would you even be there? So you're going to have the influence problem, and then there's the temptation that you go ahead and dance. That you think, well, I won't do it, but after a while, or maybe after a few times, you begin to think, well, I think maybe I will after all. And then there's participation in something that other people are doing wrong, and yet you are a part of it or appear to be. Did I see another hand? Susie, go ahead.
You asked why would you go to a dance? Well, for a lot of kids, that's the event of the year, for proms and things like that. And they want to be with their friends, but the influence of not attending is so much greater than it is trying to be a good influence in a wicked environment.
Okay, and I would associate that with Ephesians 5:11. Don't have fellowship with evil, but expose it, rebuke it. If you're going to the dance, are you telling those people that they're wrong? Are you saying, we really shouldn't be dancing? I'm here too, but you shouldn't be dancing. Again, it's an influence issue, which is what we're discussing. Other comments on the dance, attending a dance? Anyone else? Okay. Now I have a series about attending various religious groups. About attending a Catholic Mass and eating the communion in a Catholic Mass. Want to deal with that one? Karen?
Well, I'd say that's forbidden because that the Mass and their teaching and what they're doing about the communion is entirely wrong. It's false teaching. It's entirely against the Scriptures.
Okay, and of course the question, I didn't read the whole part of it, but friends or whatever family wants you to go, but you don't believe what they do about the communion, and you don't believe Catholicism, but should you go anyway and participate? And the answer is the same as I would see it, as eating the meats in the idol's temple. for all the same reasons, same problems, for all the same reasons. Other comments on eating the communion in a Catholic church meeting? Okay.
That would show fellowship with that false doctrine.
Okay. You're participating in something that is wrong of itself. Okay, just like eating the meat in the idol's temple. Okay, so you've got the fellowship, the influence, and the danger that you would begin to think maybe Catholicism's not that bad. Okay, but the next one is, yeah, go ahead.
What about attending a Catholic Mass and you're not eating communion?
Okay, I think that's the next question.
Okay.
Perhaps, maybe not. Maybe you can come back to that if you want to. The funeral, which is a mass, by the way, but it's a funeral of a relative in a Catholic church building, and because it's your friend or a relative or whatever, you want to go. What about that one? Then you don't. In this case, you said we don't participate. You don't participate in them eating the communion or whatever. You're there because it's a friend or a relative who has passed away. What about that one? Rick?
I know personally I would still have to attend if it was to basically honor the person that passed away, if you'd been a good friend with them, if you's a relation to them or whatever. But you don't have to agree with any of the service itself. Or if you just want to not attend at all and just go to the showing or viewing or whatever. But I would have to somehow still know about the person that was passed away.
Okay. Other comments? Steve?
You could reflect on the relative and the life that they lived and the impact that they might have had on your life.
Without participating in the religious aspects of it. Is that what you're saying? Another hand? I thought I saw another hand. Susie?
Well, I have a question or a comment in my head. We say attending a funeral of a relative in a Catholic church. Well, that immediately kind of throws up a red flag for me. But then, what would be the difference between going to a Baptist church or a Methodist church, or when you're going there to for a funeral as opposed to for a religious service? However, I got myself in a situation where I didn't realize in Mount Vernon there was an Episcopal, one of our friends was a member of an Episcopal church. I had no idea that it might as well have been in a Catholic church because it was the same thing. And a person next to me kept trying to hand me a program and get me to sing and everything, and I just shake my head. I thought, because I was very, I was noticed because I was not participating. But it was uncomfortable, but I don't know that it was sinful to be there.
Okay. Other comments? Dale?
Back to mine. So this point is not really the same as the point I was raising, because saying it's a funeral, that adds a different motivation, different assumptions about why you're there. So what would your thoughts be about going to a Catholic Mass? I've been to a Catholic Mass before in the Czech Republic. A friend of mine invited me to go. It didn't conflict with our church services, so I went. Been to some kind of oneness Pentecostal tent meeting one time. I attended a Mormon service one time with a couple of young men that I was studying with from the Mormon church. And one reason I'm asking that question First of all, I don't think I was wrong to go. I was wanting to see what things were like there. I didn't go there to worship. I went there to see what things were like there. I don't think that was wrong. And I think, well, let me pause there and get your thoughts.
Problem I've got with answering that, Daryl, is we're going to be there the rest of the evening, I'm afraid, and we've got some other things we want to cover. Allow 2 comments, and then we're going to move on. Time's almost up. 2 comments. Rick, is your hand up? No, it's not. I'm sorry. Terry.
I gotta have time to get my brain back to where my thoughts started. I think it falls under the depends. If the person you're going with knows what your standard is and you're looking to see what they're saying they believe in and what they do, but that you're not there to participate in eating the meat offered to an idol. You know, I'm not there to participate. I will come and watch. I think you have an opportunity perhaps to do some teaching and to realize what it is that they are believing and doing without participating in the worship. I wouldn't sing. I wouldn't, you know, when you go to a Catholic wedding or something, there's a lot of up and down and up and down. Just sit in your chair and you will be recognized they're not part of this. And so I put it under the depends. It depends to me on what the situation is.
Okay, and I saw another hand, I thought. Sharon.
Related to what Terry was saying, motivation has a lot to do with that. If you're there to so that you can have a discussion with somebody who's worshiping there, and so you're not participating. In fact, you're using that opportunity to compare what's going on to the Bible, or because you expect to be able to use that to talk to the other people about the truth at some point, then that's very different from going to just to be there or just to be with friends or something like that, where then the primary influence is a bad influence on you. So what you're going to do with that is going to have a big impact on whether it's right.
Okay, just quickly. Did Paul or the apostles ever attend religious meetings of false groups? Sure, didn't they? And then weren't they in the synagogues? Why were they there? To help them come out of it. So if the goal is to help an opportunity to teach people the truth, then that's a completely different situation than if you're there to participate. Let's move on and see if we can cover the rest of these. I don't think talk about that one now. Let's move on to this one. Okay. How about a manger scene in your yard during Christmas? Manger scene in your yard during Christmas. What about that one? Rick?
To me, that would be the same as idol worship. I'd be very careful about anything like that that is a statue of any kind or anything made by man, putting it in front of my house.
What are people going to think if you have a manger scene in front of your house? They're going to think you believe in Christmas as a religious holy day, right? Of course they're going to think that. So you're going to, all the problems with eating the idol's temple are there. You're going to be a bad influence. That kind of activity could lead you into thinking things that you shouldn't, and especially you're fellowshipping what you shouldn't. But how about the tree? I knew we needed to get to this one, so let's move. What about the tree? Christmas tree in your home. Where does this fit? Karen?
I think it depends. I think it's a very local thing. You may very well live in an area where everybody just accepts it as a tradition and nobody has a problem with it. I brought up the example before that your mom was Catholic and she became a Christian, but she could not. They did not put up a tree because for her, that was a symbol of the wrong she had come out of, and so we didn't put up a tree in order not to offend her.
Okay. Susie?
That was taught the gospel by, I don't think Daryl even knows this, by Daryl's brother and his wife. And part of that time was during Christmas, and she came out of Catholicism. And it was very offensive to her. And they would hide their tree in the closet while she was there studying. And she knew it, but she very much appreciated it. And it made a big impact on her.
Okay, other comments? Velma?
There was Noah preacher that worked in the Spanish War, and he said because of the influence it would have been, because they all took it as a religious act, they did not put one up.
Okay, so there you've got the kind of situation of eating in somebody's home. And the question is, a lot of it's going to depend on the circumstances of who is going to know about it and how they're going to be affected by it. Some circumstances, people are going to think that you are celebrating Christ's birthday if you have that tree. Other people wouldn't have that same impact. Okay? Other comments on the tree? Okay, well, just a couple more and then we'll quit on the topic. How about just exchanging gifts then, at the holiday season? No tree, we'll say, just exchanging gifts. What about that? Well, that's the meat market thing, right? No religious significance to it. Or taking the time off from work and so forth. Okay. All right, we need to quit. Anything else before we close? All right, obviously there's some we haven't gotten to. If you want to talk about some of those afterwards, that's fine. But next time we're going to move into Psalms. Anything else before we close on our study of 1 Corinthians before we move back to Psalms next week? All right, thank you for your participation.